Welcome to our study in the Intertestament period. I'm Dick Baker, your teacher. Welcome. And this is all about the countdown to Messiah. We're dealing with the 400 silent years. Sometimes it's called the time of no prophets. There were no books of the Bible written during this time, but it was far from silent, and it was far from the hand of God being revealed in many different ways. And so we are in the section of the books, tomes as our volumes, and we're looking at places that we've already seen Alexandria and the libraries that were there. We'll be doing Dead Sea Scrolls somewhat, and I just wanted to make a stop today as we look at the books, and we're going to look at Josephus. Now, Josephus himself personally did not live during the silent years. He came along probably right after Christ was crucified, and several historians note that he died at like 100 AD. That would have been about the time that John on the Isle of Patmos went home to be with the Lord. So we'll look at a bunch of interesting things, and this is not an exhaustive presentation, but enough to whet your appetite because his works are found in books that can be ordered today as hardbound and softbound. The complete works of Josephus would be the biggest volume, and then there are those that just concentrate on one thing. So let's date him at 37 to 100 AD. I like the picture on the left a whole lot better. This is the collected works of Josephus, and his first name, yes, is Flavius. So let's get into this about Flavius Josephus. He was Roman, and he was a Jewish historian. Keep that in mind. He wrote for the Romans and their history, but he also wrote Jewish history. So Flavius Josephus was, and let me share some things about him with you. He was a Jewish historian first. Now, why do I say that? Because he was a priest who was a Pharisee first, very young in his years. He's a Levite, and he knew and grew up in the priesthood, understood what it was about, and he was part of the Pharisees. Now, the Sadducees were still around, but after the temple was destroyed, after the revolt, and the temple was destroyed by the general Titus, and they just leveled the temple, the Sadducees ceased to exist because that was their domain and it was gone. We also know that he was a commander of the Jewish forces in Galilee, so he was a soldier against Rome, and I don't put this in here, he was a great politician because he could talk his way out of anything. He later became a Roman citizen, so he switched sides, and he was employed as a historian by the Flavian emperors, Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian. So what is that all about? All right, the Flavians. Now, who was Flavian? To start with, Flavian was a senator. The Caesars that ruled over the empire of Rome, some of them had incredible power. Others had some powers that were granted to them by the Senate. The Senate was the wealth. They were the people that everybody knew. They had the money, they had the power, and so they, most of the time, would put into office who they wanted to. And so Flavian saw an opportunity of a weak Caesar, and Rome's coming back from a victory. And so these individuals ought to sound familiar to you. This came out of his family. This is Vespasian and his two boys, Titus and Domitian. So what about his writings? Well, Here is a copy. You can get this online, of course, and this is the complete works. And it tells you a little bit of what is in there, but, and that this is all true, but I've put this in a different way. He deals with the Jewish wars, the Maccabees. Has a lot to say about it. He deals with Jewish antiquities. And by the way, the wars, the Jewish wars is a section. There are 4 sections in the book. And that's the first one, the Jewish war. The second one is the Jewish antiquities. And it deals with the customs and the history of Israel and God's people. And it starts way back in creation and comes to the 70 AD war where Titus had to come to town and clean things up. We know also it is about vita, life, and so he deals with life issues. What was life like? And the last one is against Appian. Appian was a Hellenized Egyptian. Well, that's where Hellenization started under Alexander the Great. It was in Alexandria, and that's in Egypt. So Egypt was loaded with Hellenists, but he writes against this individual and why they're so wrong. So I come to our third point. What you know already can be found in this book. So here's some familiar things, and they will sound very familiar to you if you've been staying with us in this study. All right, big section on the Hasmoneans. Remember, these are from the house of Hasmon. You had the Maccabees in that house first, father, 5 sons, and then the Hasmoneans took over, and they were granted, actually the Syrians sold the kingship of basically the Israel that the Maccabees had won battles and won it all back. And so they became the kings. There was a queen in there. We've looked at this, and there's an entire lesson and video on this in our series that's already been done. All right. We'll read about in here. There'll be a lot about Herod the Great and his family. And we know that Herod the Great starts about 65. I'm not right on, but I'm within a couple years before Christ. And his whole line continued on through into the book of Acts, into the New Testament. And there's within this chapter and there are these sub-chapters and titles. Also, he deals with the Roman emperors. These in particular, Caesar Augustus, Tiberius. Here we have, these are in the Bible times under Christ while Jesus was alive. You had Gaius, Caligula, the worst one, terrible. He's an insane man. Claudius and Nero. We don't think much of Nero either. And he deals with also the Roman prefects and the procurators. These are people that aren't kings, but we almost would say they are. But they rule conquered areas. And the ones that he deals with that we would be familiar with would be Pontius Pilate, of course, in the Gospels, and then Felix. His actually first name was Antonius. We don't know that in the Bible, but Felix comes up in Acts 23 and 24 with the Apostle Paul, and with Paul also Porcius Festus. And we in our Bible in the book of Acts only have Festus, but now you know these two guys have first names. There are several other areas of contribution that he deals with in this time, and they are all familiar to us. And all of these, let me look real quick, all of these are in the time of the Lord Jesus Christ. The Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Sanhedrin, that's the 70, made up of 70 of the men of the Pharisees and Sadducees. There are the Essenes and John the Baptist, and many feel that John the Baptist was an Essene. They lived in Qumran. The Dead Sea Scrolls are all about them. They're very reclusive. He deals with that. James, the first pastor of the great church in Jerusalem. The high priesthood, and Jesus is mentioned. And so there are 2 parallel incidents from Josephus and the New Testament to go on. And I end with this. As I said to you, this is just to whet your appetite. If you understand what is in the writings of Josephus and have picked off some of these names that you know about, you can go to that, of those 4 chapters, you can go to that area. If you'd like to know the customs and the times of living, go to that one and read that through. It's a thick book. It can be hard reading, but I know you can do it. So here are 2 parallel incidents from Josephus and in the New Testament. So what's written in the Bible, he writes about. And the first one is he does deal with John the Baptist and writes about him and spends time. The other one might amaze you, is about Jesus and Pilate, Pontius Pilate. And here Pilate's turning to the people, what do I do with him? And they're yelling, crucify him. Things did not turn out well. Well, I want to thank you for tuning in right now. Really appreciate it. This is where you can find me. If I can help you in any way, here's my email address. If you have comments, I entertain them also. But most of all, thank you for being a child of God and one who is interested in things not just spiritual, but the history of God's people. So stay with us, and I'll see you for the very next session that we have.